Hello, you, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. Right now, my name is Craig Telfer, and right now I am joined by my close associate, Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles of the Terrace get together? That's right. We are going to establish a new religious movement. Our central belief is that followers could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting their human nature. Our bodies will then ascend to heaven by climbing aboard a UFO. And in 1997, when the Hale-Bopp comet is closest to Earth, we, along with our 39 followers, will commit mass suicide. And while we are ingesting that phenobarbital mixed with applesauce and washed down with vodka while we're waiting to climb aboard that spaceship, I hope we get the chance to talk a little bit about lower league Scottish football.
I must admit, I had no idea what religion that was going to be. I was wondering if it was maybe Scientology, but I thought I would have recognised the names. But yeah, Suicide Pact, fair play.
Heaven's Gate.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know. Yes, I remember that now.
That's right. That's who they are. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. Bonnie Nettles did die, I think, in the mid-80s, which changed the track of the sect's direction. But that's too complicated to mention in an introduction. So we had a laugh, and then we can get in with the truth.
Your powers of persuasion must be really good to convince people to kind of buy into that.
Yes, I would like to give it a go, but then I'm just kidding, guys. We're just kidding. Right there, somebody's already taken a mouthful of it. And you're like, oh no. How am I going to explain this one to the 5-0? It's remarkable. I think that we're looking at what's going on in the United States with President Donald Trump. You look at somebody like Nigel Farage and his leadership of the Reform Party, and you just wonder how these people have got such a sway over what everyday, ordinary people. It's quite frightening.
I suppose people that are I suppose A, easily led, and B, want something to believe in and want to think that they can be part of something, whether it's something like reform or whether it's a higher power, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. Do you want to make America great again, or do you want to climb aboard a spaceship when the Hale-Bopp comet's closest to the Earth? It's really simple.
The latter sounds more fun without the poison.
Yes, I just like to have a shot on a spaceship. And if you didn't like it, just come back 15 minutes later. How was space? Nah, it wasn't really for me. It was really for me. I was worried. I'm staying airplane this weekend. I really want to get back in time to catch that. But that leads us nicely on to what we're actually going to be talking about in this podcast, and that's football. Because of the international break and the Challenge Cup ties over the weekend, this episode of the Lower League podcast is a bit of a grab bag. We'll discuss the two championship fixtures from Saturday afternoon. We'll talk about the best of the action from the KDM Evolution Trophy, and we'll round up everything else that's caught our eye. It's the kind of podcast, it's not quite patented, but our inability to have a laugh is. And if you enjoy anything that Shaughan and I discuss over the next hour or so, let me assure you that was by accident. And before we get going properly, Shaughan, you were in Denmark for Scotland's opening match of the World Cup qualifiers, a 0-0 draw in Copenhagen. How was it for you?
Yeah, it was really good. A place I've always wanted to go, Copenhagen. So when we got drawn to Denmark, I was keen to do that away trip. Belarus obviously wasn't possible because nobody could get in, and Greece away, I'd went to Athens in March, so I kind of done that one recently. So I was really keen to go to Denmark. The only kind of nuisance factor was neither me nor my pals that I was going to don't have enough points to get tickets for the away end.
Right.
So we kind of looked as our hospitality, maybe, and it was expensive, but we're like, right, well, really want to go, but don't just want to get there and watch the game in the pub, so we'll go to hospitality. So flew across the Thursday afternoon. Got there. I got there late afternoon, and I think maybe the opening times of the first pub that we went to was a kind of broad indication of what Copenhagen is like in terms of a place to go out, a place to enjoy yourself. The opening hours of the pub it opened at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it closed at 5 o'clock the next morning. I was just kind of think to myself, like, imagine you're the manager of this pub, and you're like, right, guys, what do you think? What should our opening hours be? And you're coming up with ideas, and eventually you come with, well, we could do 8 till 5. Will we just go 24 hours? No. No.
Don't be silly.
We can't be on between 5 and 8. That would just be ridiculous. So I was going to say it was a 24-hour city. It was a 21-hour city. But really, really cool place. Didn't see much of it on the Thursday because we got there a bit later. As ever, kind of ended up in there was like an Irish bar. It was pretty late at that point, and folk dancing everywhere. I had all folk in Scotland strips and kilts and what have you. So I had folk dancing on tables, dancing on seats, hanging about, but everybody having a good time. But somebody had left an ice bucket on one of the tables, but it was still full ice. So obviously somebody had ordered champagne or whatever. And then this woman appears in a Scotland strip, and she sticks her hand in the ice bucket, and it clearly wasn't a revenge attack because it was completely indiscriminate. But she just starts launching ice cubes at people's heads. Just at everybody. There was a big crowd of Scotland fans, and she's just throwing ice cubes at everybody, and people, as you can imagine,
was she quite menacing?
She was. No, she was, but the people that were getting struck by the large chunks of ice weren't laughing. So at that point, it was like, maybe time to go. Friday morning, like, I don't don't have particular long lies. I didn't actually have that much of a hangover, probably surprisingly, on the Friday. But my pals all got up, had breakfast, they just went back to their beds. I was like, well, I'm going to go out for a walk and actually see some sights. So, you'll probably have seen pictures of Copenhagen where it's like all the buildings are kind of different colours. It looks like where they filmed Balamori. So I went
that's right.
Went out there, had a look. That was really nice. Weather was terrible. It was kind of lashing with rain. By this point, it was maybe about 12. So I ducked into a pub, got a drink. A Scotland fan come over to speak to me. He was just on his own at that point as well. He goes, do you mind if I sit with you? I goes, aye, no worries. So he was an Airdrie fan that stayed in Dubai. So as you can imagine, he didn't get to too many Airdrie games. He I suppose does the opposite of me. He goes to all the Scotland away games, but doesn't really get to too many home games. Where I suppose I'm vice versa. So leathered away to him for a while. Eventually met up with my pals, and we had to be at hospitality for 7. Hospitality was class, apart from the bit where I suppose it was probably the Danish equivalent of what you do.
Okay.
So they brought in a guest, but we didn't know who he was, and he was speaking Danish. So that bit was kind of lost on us. But it's probably maybe 60-40 in terms of Danes to Scots. So there was a lot of Scots there. The food was good. The kind of drink was really good. You're allowed to take drink back to your seat. And then I suppose when the game started, and what was good about this is, I've been to dozens of Scotland games at Hampden with my pals, and I've been to half a dozen away games with them. So it's always a good trip. It's always a good day out in Glasgow, or it's always a good weekend away. But quite often, Scotland's been rubbish, or the results been rubbish, or the game's been like a kind of punch in the stomach is how it makes you feel. But actually, it was a class trip, and Scotland done quite well, and they got a good result. And then at full time, it turned out where we were sitting, it was kind of people that had been in hospitality, and what we didn't realise until full time was it must have been friends and family of the players as well.
Oh, nice.
So I've never really done it before, but we were in the mixing with them. But the players were all coming across, and they were kind of speaking to their family and stuff, so we still had a drink at this point. So we just kind of sat down and let the crowd drift away, and then my pal went and got his picture taken with Lyndon Dykes. He was getting his picture taken with loads of people. So eventually left maybe half an hour after the game finished. There was a pub that was kind of round the corner, because there was still a lot of people milling about. So we just had a drink there, let the crowds disperse. Easier to get a train after that point. Probably didn't leave until might have been about 12, the back of 12, in terms of properly getting away from the stadium, and then ended up in an Irish pub until whatever time it was, 2 o'clock maybe. But the problem was, and this was the only negative, is that we had to be in a taxi by 8:30 because the flight was at, so yeah, 8:30, had to be at the airport for 9, flight was at 10:30, but then we had 6 hours in Heathrow.
Oh man.
So you had 6 hours in Heathrow with a hangover, waiting for your connection up to Edinburgh. But regardless of that small inconvenience, it was really good. Really enjoyed it.
Class, man. That's absolutely delighted to hear that, and then delighted to hear your mate got his picture taken with Lyndon Dykes. Brilliant. That's such a cool guy. Such a cool guy. Great to see he was involved. But unfortunately, before we get going, we have to do some clarifications. 1 week we might go without making any errors, but sadly, here we are. We were contacted by Tom Hosey, the editor of Partick Thistle's Matchday programme, and it turns out Shaughan was not mentioned in direct comparison to the charity fundraiser and bad father Captain Sir Tom Moore in last week's programme, but they were mentioned in the same paragraph. Not compared to, but mentioned just several lines apart. So glad to get that cleared up.
But that
most of anyone.
But that part was edited out, wasn't it? That was not included. It had been written, but it wasn't included. So actually, I'm quite glad I couldn't find the programme.
Yes.
What a waste of time that would have been.
Yes, that's right. One of the poorest fathers ever to have graced this country. I'd rather not be compared to him. And also on Monday Night Show, and this is more of a personal thing, Joel Sked compared his foster dog snoring to, I quote, a Chincook helicopter. I was listening to the podcast this morning. I actually had to do a double take and rewind it to listen. No, he called it a Chincook helicopter, which obviously he meant Chinook. And I imagine most people will have been screaming at the app and rewinding it to make sure that's what he said. But no, there you go.
It's funny because I was laughing at a pronunciation of a word. Earlier it was Dougie Emery. He pronounced tenacity, tenacity. But that's not as bad as Chinook, to be fair.
I don't know. Tenacity, like Chinook's not a word that comes up in everyday conversation. I mean, unless you work for the military, Chinook's not a word that's going to come up every day in conversation. Tenacity, I think tenacity is fairly commonplace, particularly in footballing parlance. So, fair play to Dougie Emery. Fair play to Dougie Emery. But well, to a much lesser extent. fair play to Joe. And yes, speaking of Dougie Emery, we're going to park him for the time being because our first match of our 2-game championship roundup saw Ross County take on Arbroath in the Highlands. This was Tony Docherty's first game in charge of the Staggies, and it was Tony Docherty's first loss. Nikolai Todorov put the Smokies ahead after 31 minutes, and although Kieran Phillips' penalty and the hour mark restored parity, Aaron Muirhead grabbed the winner from the spot at the death. Arbroath, they continue to build on this excellent start to the season, 10 points from the 5 matches, and they're up into third. But County, still in abysmal form at the moment, yet to win a game, and they prop up the division with just 2 points. I've got to say, I really, really enjoyed the highlights from this one from Ross County. Very different to how most matchday highlights are compiled. I think they just take the commentary as live, or they go back and re-record the commentary as live. Whereas this one, you did a sort of an old school, like, football league show, or Scott Sport, or Football First.
Yes, football. So Football First was how I thought in terms of they kind of tell you what's about to happen, which is very much unique. Yes, yeah, very unique in terms of Scottish football highlights. But yes, I'm glad they've now got a package. Slightly unusual camera angle, although it did give us a great view of the first goal, certainly. But regardless, great to have one, and didn't mind the commentary at all.
Yes, and certainly we've really upgraded from the 14 seconds we were given to see all 8 goals in the 8-0 win over Edinburgh City in the League Cup at the beginning of the season. But nevertheless, Shaughan, very disappointing day for Ross County, and disappointing was a word that Tony Docherty used in his post-match interview. A lot of people drawn direct comparisons to Don Cowie, who began pretty much every post-match interview over the last 9 months with the word disappointing. But nevertheless, what did you make of Ross County 1, Arbroath 2?
I did laugh at Tony Docherty using the word disappointing so soon after Ross County fans were delighted to get the back of Don Cowie and his repeated use of the word. But I thought there was elements of what Tony Docherty said after the game that rung true, but likewise David Gold as well. So David Gold said that he thought Arbroath are terrific. He said that he was kind of like really proud of their performance, and I think especially the first half, it looked like, I think, judging by the highlights, it looked like it was reasonably close. But in terms of reading about the game, it sounded like Arbroath were the better side, albeit Aidan McAdams had saves to make, but reasonably comfortable ones. And I thought it looked like they probably merited the lead. Likewise, so I think in terms of what Tony Docherty said, that when they equalised, they felt that was like they deserved their equaliser, and if anybody was going to go on and win the game, he felt like it was going to be them, and that makes sense. They hit the bar, they had 2 goals disallowed. And I think where Arbroath did enjoy a good bit of fortune, other than the 2 disallowed goals and the fact that Akil Wright hit the bar, was the fact that Ronan Hale was on international duty. Because maybe if he'd been there, then they would have been a wee bit more clinical in front of goal in that second half when they were creating chances. But regardless, brilliant result for Arbroath, and again, it kind of, that winning goal, as much as it maybe came against the run of play at that point, was just stupidity from Gallagher, and kind of sums up both Ross County and his campaign to date.
There's a lot to unpack there from what you said, Shaughan. But we'll start with Declan Gallagher, just since you finished with him. Yeah, not been great so far. I thought when Gallagher moved to County, I thought that makes him straight away the best centre-back in the Championship. Someone who had done, although he flitted in and out of that Dundee United team last season, nevertheless, he was still the mainstay of a squad. Still, you still got the personality to involve yourself in the squad, to prove Jim Goodwin wrong at points and come back into the team when a lot of people had written you off. I thought it'd be a smashing sign for Ross County. That hasn't been the case. The trip on Jacob McIntyre for the penalty at the end, you don't need to dive in. You can. He's taken the touch past you, stand him up, show him to the byline, make him put a cross in it, and if the cross goes in and it gets, and Taylor Stevens there to finish it or whatever, fair enough, at least you've done your job. But you dive in, it's a really poor penalty to give away. And on top of that as well, Gallagher doesn't pick up Todorov for that opening goal. The highlights, as you mentioned there, because of where the camera's positioned, you've got a fantastic view of all the various aspects. You can see from an atomic level how this goal's put together. And it seems to me he follows Todorov into the box, but then just stops paying attention to him just as Craig Watson whips that ball in. And so for him, very, very frustrating afternoon, and just really disappointing. I think that for a player of his calibre, we shouldn't be losing goals like those 2 that we saw at the weekend.
Yeah, and I wondered if there was maybe a decision to make in terms of how, because you presume that John Robertson had a lot of input in terms of how this team set up and how it started. Bear in mind,
Tony Docherty had one training session.
So you'd imagine he was maybe relying on Robertson to a degree. So I did wonder if there's changes to make. Maybe Gallagher comes out, even just temporarily. But he was also made the captain for this game. I don't know if Docherty had been the captain up until this point, but he was certainly captain for the first time going into this. So you would imagine that Tony Docherty feels that he is the leader and he is the mainstay of that defence going forward. Maybe things changed by full time, but as you say, it essentially summed up Ross County's start to the season. It's not just been tactics or anything. It's just individually Ross County have generally been poor.
Yeah, I think that's right as well. And they had their chance in this game. You mentioned Akil Wright hitting the bar. Tony Docherty said that the decision to disallow the second goal was a strange decision.
He said he'd never seen it before, which I cannot believe it.
So if you've not seen it, basically it's like, see, we've got my notes. Yeah, it's a corner kick. It's Declan Gallagher that actually scores. Jay Henderson takes the corner, but the ball bends out of play before coming back in, and Gallagher header in it. Have you not seen that? You've been involved in hundreds of football matches. I mean, it's not the most commonplace thing to happen in a game of football, but it's the kind of thing that happens. So, like the idea that you had 2 perfectly good goals disallowed, well, no, that one, the ball went out of play. And for what it's worth, just actually, that's a stupid rule. I would actually ban that, like the ball going out at corner kicks and coming back in. I think they should just if it bends out and comes back in, what harm's done?
Well, it's went out. So there's the first harm.
Aye, but it's a corner kick, so it's a bit different.
All right, so if you take no, that would not work. But no, you can't kick the ball out of play, but and then it comes back in.
But if it goes out and comes back in, just as but anyway, I think we should abolish that rule. But the other disallowed goal, it's really, really annoying from James Scott's perspective, because it's a brilliant pass. It's actually a really nice move, really good counter-attack from County. They really cut through Arbroath at that point. Henderson's ball in is great, and you can see Scott is. The Arbroath backline's quite disjointed there. Muirhead's about a yard and a half in front. But then just as Henderson about to that ball, Scott takes that extra step forward, plays himself offside, and you could see actually, I don't know if you noticed this, but when Henderson sliced to play that passing, the first thing he does is turn to the linesman to get a look at him. So those would be two really disappointing aspects from that regard. But to say that they were perfectly good goals, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. But what I would say though, and this is going all the way back to when you started talking about the manager's post-match interviews. See, for David Gold, for instance, when you make changes that have a material impact on the game, you're not just bringing players off because they're tired and so on. You've got a direct plan with the changes you make in mind. You must be absolutely delighted. And he mentioned it. And of course he'd mention it, because if I'd done the same thing, I'd be telling everyone what I'd done. But the decision to bring on McIntyre and to bring on Taylor Stephen when County were looking a wee bit tired, and bring on guys who have got legs, they're fast, they're good ball carriers, I mean, that ultimately won them the match. Because it was that the ball getting kicked out the back, Stephen having the pace to run between two players, McIntyre having the pace to keep up with him, and then being able to draw that foul from Gallagher, and then Aaron Muirhead smashes home the penalty there. So from David Gold's perspective, not just going up to what is on paper for a lot of teams the most difficult away day, not just the fact that County should be a good side, but it's all the travelling that's involved with that. It's a long day for the players. So I would always think that those places like Stranraer, Elgin, Ross County, Inverness, difficult places to go, not just because of what's happening on the football pitch, but all the logistics involved as well. So David Gold would be absolutely delighted, not just for his team's character, but I think everything about that performance, I think that perhaps epitomises what we've come to expect from this Arbroath team.
Yes, you're right. And in terms of those kind of long, lengthy journeys, you're right. It does. Like from doing them yourself, it feels like a trek, but to actually have to play football at the back of it as well. Fair play. I did laugh when he mentioned the subs. He said something along the lines of, I thought all the substitutes done really well, but he was one of the subs. He made 3 subs and he was one of them.
Quite right.
But interesting in terms of the two that combined. So like Taylor Stephen and Jacob McIntyre. McIntyre is probably somebody who maybe I know a wee bit less about and maybe saw a wee bit less of. I know he played a lot of games for Kelty. The fact that Kelty don't have a lot of fans on Pie and Bovril, so they maybe wasn't discussed quite as much as you might have read about other players. The fact he didn't score that many goals or be involved in too many goals, and maybe didn't see him that much on highlights, albeit we would watch Kelty most weeks. But just in terms of him and Stephen, because at that point they were under the cosh. So see, even if they didn't, let's say they didn't get that penalty, the game finishes 1-1. Just the fact that they were able to drag the ball between them from one end of the park all the way, just getting the team forward, you feel that's going to be a pretty good weapon that they'll have between now and the end of the season. And I think Taylor Stephen is a really good opportunity for him as well, because we saw him at Alloa, and I thought he looked sensational at times at Alloa. But probably was never going to get the opportunities at St Johnstone, especially now when they have such a big squad. There's so much kind of quality amongst that squad.
A lot of wide players in that team as well at the moment, especially Fotheringham coming in.
And even when he was getting an opportunity, it was at wing back. But I kind of feel like at Arbroath, he's probably going to be able to play where he feels more comfortable and can perform to the best of his ability. So I think it's a great move for him, and I think it's a great move for Arbroath as well.
Now, you're right about the lack of Kelty fans in Pie and Bovril. You've got one who just posts his photo albums in every thread and one who says Neeb all the time. So you're not really spoilt for choice there. We mentioned, though, about the opening goal there. And we suppose we talked about it from Declan Gallagher's perspective, but I think it's important to talk about it from just Arbroath's perspective, because I think it's a really, really good goal. Mm-hmm. We're a bit clumsy from Ross County to give the ball away, but Arbroath spring onto it brilliantly. There's 6 passes involved, 6 different players. The ball's worked out to Craig Watson on the right. And because of, we mentioned there, the camera angle is pretty much in line with Watson as he whips the ball in. First time ball into the box. And I've watched it back a load of times when I was pulling the notes together for this. It is basically him putting the ball in a silver salver and going to Nikolai Todorov. It is a phenomenal ball into the box. And the big man, the big striker, that's the sort of stuff he thrives on. Big balls into the box that he can just, I was going to say bully people, but you didn't have to bully anyone, just Declan Gallagher forgot he was there. But just to be able to boom, put that into the net, and it's a brilliant goal from Arbroath. And I suppose that's the kind of goal that highlights everything that Arbroath are good at, where there's the whatever Docherty called it, tenacity and winning the ball back, but having the quality and possession to work it forward. It was all one touch, two touch passing there before it's played out to Watson, and that ball in, just phenomenal.
It'll be interesting actually, because if that's a quality of delivery that you're going to get into the box, say once, twice, 3 times a game, and Todorov is starting, I would expect Todorov to be scoring for those kind of deliveries.
Rejected Commodores song titles. I know what you mean, though. I know what you mean. For a big striker like him who thrives on like aggression and getting his big bonds and stuff, you can't miss. You can't miss if your wide players are doing that.
And the thing as well, he's played for good Inverness teams in the championship. He played for the Airdrie team that finished 4th. So he's played for teams that have challenged at the top end of the championship. I'm not entirely sure he's ever scored more than 9 league goals. But actually, the way he started this season, I wouldn't be surprised if he is getting to double figures for a part-time team in a full-time league, which would be brilliant.
It might piggyback onto what we were saying last week when we talked about Todorov, that for long periods in his career, he's never really been considered the number 9, the number 1 striker in the team's squad list. He'll be an option, something different you can bring off the bench. But I think the way he's playing at Arbroath at the moment, I think Gavin Riley's actually got a job to try and get back into the team, because it's Todorov's spot to lose at the moment. What about, we talked about Craig Watson's impact on the opening goal. Craig Watson certainly had a role to play in the county's equaliser, because it was a handball. Ross Docherty has a snapshot from the edge of the area when the ball breaks to him, and it hits Craig Watson's arm, and Phillips steps up and sends McAdams the wrong way. Now, I watched it back a couple of times. The referee had a good look at it. He was about 10 yards away from it. Hard to tell if this is a penalty, because his arms do seem to be a bit away from his body, but he looks like he's a cowboy about to enter into a duel with someone. And the ball does strike him, but I can't tell if it's his like bicep or his oxter where it hits.
Aye, so I had sympathy for him, because like just before that, because the ball's kind of pine around in the penalty box, and it's Watson that does a diving header to clear the ball away. And I think the shot that he then consequently blocks has actually just been struck as he gets back to his feet. So he's only really just starting to set himself as that ball's travelling towards him. I suppose the problem that he then has, that maybe that kind of swings the referee or the linesman, is the ball does travel quite a distance. And I must admit, I thought it did strike his arm rather than his shoulder or whatever. So I had sympathy for him, but I did think it was a penalty. But like you could see, I mean, he doesn't go striding over to the assistant referee, but he's kind of putting his arms out to say quite 2 or 3 times that absolutely wasn't a handball. Maybe it wasn't, and it's hard to tell when you've just got one angle, but I must admit, I thought on the balance it probably was.
It probably was, yeah. David Gold mentioned it in his post-match interview. I think he said something along the lines of, Johnny, that's Craig Watson's nickname. I'd say I'm Johnny, like I'm pals with him. He said that Craig Watson's an honest player, and he says he didn't handballed it, so he's likely to believe him. So fair play. I mean, ultimately it didn't have an impact in the game because Arbroath won it. One of the things, it wasn't the most illuminating post-match interviews. They never really tend to be with players, but there was an interview with Aaron Muirhead and Ryan Dow, and Muirhead said that it's probably the kind of result that most people will wake up and take notice of Arbroath after, if they hadn't already. I would have thought that people would be well aware of Arbroath's capabilities. I mean, I'm not saying that all football players will watch other games. Sometimes players just have no interest in football outside of the when they're actually training, when they're actually playing. But going right back to the first game of the season when Arbroath played Ayr, I would assume that a lot of players would be sitting down on their sofas on Friday night tuning in to watch that, and they'd have seen Arbroath and thought that this team are actually quite handy here. I don't think anyone is just sitting and taking notice of Arbroath at the moment. I think that from that first game of the season, people will have thought this are a handy side. But I suppose it's the kind of result that a lot of other people, maybe who haven't been paying an eye in the division, will be like, "Oof, are we going to get a reprise of Arbroath in the 21-22 season?" Something like that.
I suppose it's one that maybe, if you were in any doubt, it maybe confirms the fact that Arbroath are actually quite a good side. He kind of alluded to the fact that he felt they'd been written off and kind of didn't say going under the radar, but I think that's what he meant. And that this result, you're right, might mean that they're no longer able to do that. I did think it was quite funny, Muirhead in general. Remember when we talked about John McGlynn, when it was like you'd be surprised that that he's been interviewed. So just before it started, Aaron Muirhead just looks like he's having a laugh. He's got this massive, massive grin on his face. And then as soon as the first question is asked, go, Aaron, and just all emotion goes from his face. It just becomes really, really dour. And then when it's like, because it's a dual interview and it goes to Ryan Dow, and it just looks like Aaron Muirhead completely just zones out as if he's thinking about something completely different as Dow gives his answers.
I don't know if you watched Mick Kennedy's post-match interview after the Hamilton Accies game from the weekend.
I didn't.
Well, there was a bit in it. It's quite a short interview, and I always quite like listening to Kennedy. He's got an interesting perspective on the game, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. I think he's always worth listening to. But there's a bit where there's a hard cut in the interview where he answers one question. There's a cut, and he's got a big smile on his face. So something's obviously, I had no idea what had happened between. But he goes from just quite a serious look to this big grin, and then he answers the next question. So it's something along those lines. But from Tony Docherty, sticking with post-match interviews, I mean, Tony Docherty, despite the fact he was filmed by the world's tallest cameraman, the camera...
He's very small, so maybe he was just a reasonably tall cameraman.
He said that it's a game that Ross County should never lose. You should take a point from this kind of game at the very worst. And I thought, not sure about that. I think that's being very dismissive of Arbroath. I saw people were unhappy that he didn't praise Arbroath or give them the kudos they deserved for the win. I mean, that's up to Tony Docherty, but I thought that this is the kind of game we should never lose. Don't know about that. You know, Arbroath are a pretty good side. If you want to beat Arbroath, you're going to have to work really hard to do it. And yeah, there were some things that didn't necessarily go in their favour. You know, Wright hitting the crossbar, the two disallowed goals. I don't know, man. I thought Arbroath were worth the win here.
Did you? So it's funny. So you could be absolutely right. I didn't really take it in that way. I thought he meant they shouldn't be losing that game because the entire momentum was with them. They were probably the better team in the second half. So it was kind of like,
right.
hey, you allowed yourself to be countered, so that shouldn't happen, and there should be a bit better game management. But you could be right, I'm not sure.
I think maybe it's like when you look at it at face value, a team like Ross County should not be losing to a team like Arbroath. That's one way you could read that. Or you could be like, we were on top by that point. We had 2 goals disallowed. We shouldn't be. That's not the game. We should lose a point at the very worst. Maybe I think you're right. Actually, I think I've perhaps read too much into it. I think you're correct there. Yeah, the game's heading towards stalemate. You've been on top, and there's a counter attack, and your veteran centre back dives in like that. I think you're probably right. I think that's probably a more straightforward reading of it. But up next, very interesting game for County. They are travelling down to Somerset Park to take on the beleaguered Ayr United.
Yeah, I mean, the two surprise packages of the division in a negative sense. You could potentially argue that in terms of the second half, there was something about Ross County that maybe gives you a wee bit of encouragement. The fact that Tony Docherty has an extra 5 days now to kind of get his ideas across, to get to know his team a bit more, maybe give a wee bit more of his identity on the team. I do wonder if I don't think Ross County will lose. I do think on balance, I maybe expect them to maybe just to sneak it. I'll go for an away win.
I think the shorthand analysis, certainly from the other Terrace podcasts I've been listening to, when they talk about the Dundee team, Tony Docherty's Dundee team, was that they were, particularly in his first season, like defensively porous, but really, really exciting to watch. And in fact, the times I did see Dundee in the telly, they're always good value. Whereas last season, the season ultimately cost him his job. They were defensively porous, but didn't necessarily have that swashbuckling style of play to go along with it. So it'll be very interesting to see what he does. He's certainly, from an attacking sense, he's got so many, like on paper, good players to select from. Ronan Hale should be back in the fold, which will be a huge boon for them after his exploits with Northern Ireland. It feels as though County, they're going to have to start getting a win at some point. And I think Ayr United is probably an ideal team to be taken on at the moment, because I mean, there's Leon King's been signed from Rangers. Certainly, I saw him a couple of times last season for Queen's Park. not sure that he's got much of a future at Rangers, if we're being charitable about that. So I'm not exactly sure where he fits into this area United. Well, I know he's going to fit. He's going to play centre back, but what he's going to bring to it. So that I think that'll be a very interesting. That's probably the most interesting fixture out the lot of them. Oh, actually, no, St Johnstone Raith Rovers is quite interesting.
Yeah,
but this is more interesting because these are two teams who we thought would be challenging for the title. Have just started in quite mediocre fashion.
In terms of what you said about Dundee. And you're absolutely spot on. I think, but even if that is an issue that he has this season, I suppose what he didn't have at Dundee is, I still think they have one of the better squads in the division. They'll have one of the biggest budgets in the division. So even if they do concede goals, they should still have enough about them, which he didn't have at Dundee, just to outscore teams. So it could be very, very exciting. But like, you would still like to think, as much as I would be astonished if they were to overhaul St Johnstone, but there is more than long enough of the season to go to make a good stab at the playoffs, and even from then, if he gets things right, they could still be a favourite for the playoffs. But I do think it'll be a good watch from here on in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that match showed that they are capable of creating chances and creating openings. You know, I don't think it was, you know, Arbroath might have been the better side, but only by just. You know, we did mention about Aidan McAdams had to make some really good saves. I think there was a really great save at one point from Iacovitti.
Yeah.
Close range header. He managed to get and tip that over the bar. And another day you score that, and another day James Scott's not offside, and you're 2-1 up, and then you maybe go on to win the game 3-4-1. So there's all these factors. Well, I can understand. I mean, it's one match. I understand that county fans are quite distressed at the direction of travel. I mean, you're so far behind St Johnstone now at the top of the table that you may have to recalibrate your expectations from title challenge to promotion challenge. But this will give us a good indication as to where they are. Tony Docherty, a week looking after the team, playing against a side who are out of form as well. Very, very intriguing counter. And Arbroath will host Dunfermline Athletic at Gayfield.
Yeah, I thought Dunfermline were pretty good last time out, funnily enough, against Ross County, and I think if it hadn't been for Ronan Hale, they probably would have won that quite comfortably. Certainly they looked considerably better than when they were at Starts Park the week previous, and Neil Collins had made a number of changes that I think
Neil Collins?
Neil Lennon made a number of changes that fans were certainly wanting to see, and it turned out it had a massive kind of positive impact on the performance. However, despite that, considering Arbroath's start to the season, I cannot see past them for a home win.
Yeah, for some reason I think maybe it's just I'm part-time pilled, but I just think Arbroath are going to lose at some point, and you think that the teams are coming up against you, think, yeah, well, they're going to beat them. But there you go up, like as we say, the hardest on paper, the hardest fixture in the division, and you come out it with 3 points. So if you can do that, then you should be able to beat Dunfermline at home. I'm going for a draw for this one. I don't think Arbroath will get beat, but I've got a funny feeling Dunfermline might cause them issues.
I think it'll be a difficult game, but I've made the mistake of consistently thinking that Arbroath will lose, so I should probably stop that.
Yeah, me too. Stop that. Arbroath will go the rest of the season unbeaten. Now let us head to Inverclyde, where Greenock Morton took on Raith Rovers at Capello. Saturdays at 3. It is the only place I'd ever want to be. It was Dylan Easton who got the only goal of the game, took advantage of a defensive error early on in the second half to earn the victory for the Rovers, but there was a nervous finish after Josh Mullen was red carded with just 13 minutes to go. Alas, Morton couldn't press home their advantage, and the Rovers take home the points. That was Morton's first league defeat of the campaign. It's also now 5 games without victory. They're in 6th place with 4 points. The Rovers, meanwhile, motoring along very nicely, bounced back well from last week's defeat at Partick Thistle, and they're now in 2nd with 10 points. Shaughan, you watched this match on a stream in the Heathrow Departure Lounge. I actually went to this game. I was standing in the cowshed. I can see myself on the Raith Rovers highlights. I had nothing better to do my Saturday afternoon. So I think this could be the most detailed discussion we're ever likely to have about a football match. It's not referring back to highlights. It's a game that we both watched, albeit in different formats. Let's talk about Morton 0, Raith Rovers 1.
It wasn't very good, was it?
No, I mean, I've got to say, the Cowshed is one of the best places I've ever watched football. I absolutely loved it in there, and I can understand the attraction to it and why it's so venerated by Morton fans and wider Scottish football. I thought it was brilliant. It reminded me of the Donald Smiley enclosure at Stennismuir, just a lot bigger and a bit steeper, and just to be able to sit, like stand, or to be able to stand, just leaning on a big barrier, watching the football going on a quite a nice day. No better feeling. Just unfortunately, the match didn't go along with the general ambience of it. Yeah, it was a poor game of football.
There was almost points where, because you'd already told me you were going, and see when I got to like about 40 minutes in, I almost felt like I might need to send you a message to apologise. Just the fact that like one of my pals has went out of their way to go to a Raith Rovers game, and they're kind of being served up this slop.
Yeah.
So I felt a wee bit sorry for you. But I did laugh when Barry Robson said that they knew it was going to be a terrible game, and I thought, maybe if only he'd messaged that to Craig Telfer beforehand, he maybe could have made a different choice for his Saturday afternoon.
Do you remember the Dave counter we had, where we used to tally up the number of times Michael McIndoe would say Dave in his post-match interview? What about the Barry Robson played smart counter, with the number of times he uses the word played smart? Aye, 6 times. We played like men, and then we played smart. You know, they'd been speaking. Obviously, there's a lot of I say a lot about the match to discuss. But in Barry Robson's interview, I actually had to stop what I was doing and text you when I was watching it back, because he talks about the winning goal. Now, for those who haven't seen it, the winning goal, no exaggeration to say, it is Josh Ray leathers the ball up the park. The Morton goalkeeper, Chris Moore, the Morton defender, they misread it, and then Dylan Easton just heads it over the goalie. Barry Robson says they worked on it. Now, I would like to know if any member of the Raith Rovers staff, a Raith Rovers player, wants to get in touch with myself or Shaughan anonymously and tell us exactly what is happening at the Raith Rovers training. We would love to know, because there's absolutely no way a team can work on that.
I'm going to disagree with you.
It's a punt off the park where the ball's allowed to bounce on the edge of the penalty area.
It'd be a really weird thing to make up, though. Surely Barry Robson hasn't made that up. I refuse to believe that.
It just feels like normally if you're working on chances, it's all about somebody drops deep to get the ball and it's passed out wide, and it's all based on movement. You don't expect Josh Ray to kick the ball virtually the entire length of the park, no one to touch it, and then Dylan Easton, one of the shortest players, to get his head on it and lift it over the goalkeeper. Not having it.
Ray's accuracy is very, very good. So I must admit, watching it, I just thought it was a leather up the park. And then listening to Barry Robson's interview, I did laugh at the suggestion that they've been working on it during the week. He did say, to be fair, that they've been working on the ball to Paul McMullen to get behind the defence rather than to Dylan Easton. But I did, when the more I thought about it, the more I think, well, strange thing to lie about, strange thing to make up. So maybe that was the case.
One of the things I did like about the game, because I think this must be the first time in a long time where I've actually seen the Rovers in the flesh. This will sound really weird to say. A wee bit starstruck watching them, because the only time I really watch the Rovers is when they're playing on Friday nights on the Championship. And so you get used to watching these guys like Callum Fordyce, Paul Hannon, Lewis Stevenson, Ross Matthews, Lewis Vaughan, Dylan Easton. And it's great watching them most of the time. And just seeing like them sprinting down the wing in front of you, like, that's pretty cool. That's Dylan Easton right there. Now, I know we've met Dylan Easton when he came for A View for the Terrace live show a couple of years ago. It said, look, as always, he's a really nice guy. They're all really nice guys. But just seeing him in action, he was the sort of player, I just go and get the ball to Dylan Easton. Go and get the ball to Dylan Easton and make something happen. And I don't think the team did that enough. But some of his touches and his feints and just he's not a chaos factor. It's just the excitement that he can bring to the ball. I think he must be a good player to watch on a regular basis, albeit he didn't particularly do much in this match. But I think you're right. I think that beyond, there was a Nathan Shaw free kick in the first half. Dylan Easton's goal, pretty much all the interesting stuff happened after the red card.
Yeah.
When Morton tried to, a bit slow, but tried to playing their advantage.
It was quite interesting listening to going back to Robson, and I'd listened to Robson's interview first, and he'd mentioned the fact that the park was really sticky. He did kind of go back and say, incidentally, it's a really good park, but it's really dry. And so the ball didn't really move very quick. So he harped back again to playing smart and essentially going more direct than they normally would. I would also counter that with the fact that they go long quite a bit, but on Saturday they went especially long, constantly, played very little football. Whereas Morton were trying to play football, and it just wasn't working. Probably didn't have the quality to play through the lines, but like it was even slower than they intended it to be because of the state of the park, I suppose. I'm sorry, but I'll try to interrupt there. I don't know if this came across in your stream, but there was a bit in the first half where Ian Wilson was in the ball, and I think there was a pass on where he could have played it forward, but instead played it sideways, and the cowshed were jeering him, and he turned round and did the best way to describe it, like a dismissive gesture. Like, I mean, if you're listening to this, you won't know what I mean, but if you're watching this on YouTube, it was like, you throw your hand up, like fuck off. You know what I mean? And then he got a wee bit back, but then next time he was on the ball, he did make a really incisive pass, and he got a big applause for it. So it was nothing. It wasn't like a lingering incident that carried on. But I think that they were a bit slow. Yes, you could visibly see it, and the fans in the cowshed were very aware that there was a lack of tempo to it. And Emery said that, he kind of admitted actually that their style of play, or what they wanted to do, was probably hindered by the park, and kind of alluded to what Robson has suggested, that maybe they should have went a wee bit more direct. And again, Emery said, and what I didn't realise, but they don't have any sprinklers. So because it's been so dry, they don't have any method of water in the park, and that's why it was so sticky. And I do think, I don't think Morton or Raith Rovers played particularly well, but I do think the park was the hindrance to both teams.
There was just a really funny bit. Sorry, Shaughan, I actually made a note of this to go back to the goal. You know, this goal that Rovers spent all week in training working on. I watched this in the Raith Rovers highlights and I burst out laughing. It was a really funny moment. The Rovers highlights are excellent. We've acknowledged that they're one of the best, up there with Stranraer in terms of the best highlights package in the lower leagues. There's a camera behind the goal that show the ball like looping into the net, and you can hear the voice. I don't know if you picked up this. You can hear the voice and saying, "What the fucking hell was that?" And now, right, that in itself is really funny, but it's delivered in the exact same tone and cadence as the Ayr United fan when Callum Crane scored at the Rex. You know, that's a fucking left back. You know, what the fucking hell was that? I thought, is that the same person?
Well, he had a free Saturday. So maybe.
A free Saturday. It could have been. He was at the Rex in 2018. He's at Capello 7 years later. Very, very funny. Very, very funny. At least that was funny. That was one of the only funny bits. I mean, the referee was getting a bit of stick in this game. I think he got a couple of big calls wrong. I thought he got a couple of big calls wrong anyway. And I suppose the big one, 77 minutes. Michael Garrity collects the ball on the left-hand side, takes a touch to come in field. Josh Mullen slides in quite aggressively, quite quickly, wipes him out, and the referee's got the red card out straight away. Dougie Emery didn't think it was a red card. Barry Robson didn't think it was a red card either. In real time, I thought it was, because he did come in at some speed. Having watched it back in the highlights and having seen it from different angles, I'm not quite as convinced. What do you thought?
So watching it on the stream, and bear in mind it was like a kind of pixel up, so you're never going to get the best angle. I thought it was a red. However, I think my opinion was probably made up by the referee, Lloyd Wilson, because, and he does this a lot, Wilson, he's quite pernickety, and you always get the impression that he wants to get involved. Like, he'll sprint across to an incident. Like, he didn't have to sprint across, but he was desperate to get to Mullen. Like, he was quite excited about being involved, I suppose. So I think as soon as he made that gesture, that kind of started to sprint, I goes, he's off here. But I thought right away he was in a bit of bother. And it was interesting. Presumably you wouldn't have seen it, but right in the kind of bottom of the picture, you see it on the highlights as well, and I saw it at the time, Jack Hamilton puts his head in his hands. So Jack Hamilton obviously thought at that point, he's getting a red card here. But when I was reading about the incident later on that evening, and I was like, right, okay, so both sets of fans seem to be in agreement that it wasn't a red card, so fair enough. But when I watched the highlights, I must admit, I didn't really have too much an issue with it being a red. I thought he really it's a bad tackle. He catches him, albeit I don't think he catches him too high, but I do think he collides at a rate of knots. So I didn't think it was the worst decision, put it that way.
He did fly into him.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that. It's actually, from watching it in real time, it doesn't come across as much on the video. In real time, he did fly into him. He did go into him at some speed there. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose you only get one chance to see it, and he was quite aggressive. But what about then Jackson Longridge's disallowed goal? I thought this Grant Gillespie sort of backs into Josh Ray, who then slips, and then there's Longridge just powers the header into the net, and it's a linesman that's disallowed it. I don't know, man. I think that Josh Ray got very lucky with this one.
So do I, but I think that Lloyd Wilson and his assistant got the correct decision, but for the wrong reason.
Okay.
Because Gillespie is offside, and he's essentially standing on, well, he's inches away from Josh Ray. So if he is offside, which it looks like he is, then he has to be interfering with play at that point. So the chat, Grant Gillespie said that I think he said the referee said it was a foul. He wasn't allowed to talk to the referee, albeit I think the referee's only supposed to speak to the captain. So anyway, regardless, he said it'd been for a foul. Dougie Emery said that he'd been told it was for a foul. So that means it's wrong, because I didn't see any foul. Yes, there was some coming together with Josh Ray, but certainly not enough to warrant it being a free kick. But I do think he's offside. I think Gillespie's offside. I think he's interfering with play at that point. So I think it probably should have been disallowed, but not for the reason that the referee done it for.
It sounds like a mathematics equation that's worth 5 marks, where you've got the right answer but the working's wrong. Is that what you're saying?
But does it really matter if it's the correct decision? And I'm not saying it is, but I think it might be. Does it really matter how he's come to the conclusion?
Yeah, I suppose. I see what you mean. And when I was watching this match, I was thinking a lot of the stuff, the conversation that you and I have had in this podcast about Raith Rovers. And one of the things, for the life of me, I thought that Raith Rovers were generally pretty solid. I thought Lewis Stevenson had a good game at left back. Fordyce was generally quite comfortable. Easton, excited seeing the ball. One player that I just thought had no impact in the game, and I can't understand why he was starting in that position, Paul McMullen, was playing centre forward. And it feels like, I can imagine playing Paul McMullen as centre forward as part of a two, if it's a little and large partnership where the big boy's going to win flick-ons and McMullen's going to run in behind. I just didn't see any of that. I'm not sure I'm not sure what you're getting from playing Paul McMullen as an orthodox centre forward there.
I find this current Rovers team or essentially what Barry Robson is trying to do really interesting, because he seems to be picking a formation that absolutely does not get the best from some of the better players in the squad. So it's a formation that doesn't use Lewis Vaughan. It's a formation, so even though he's going direct on Saturday, he didn't play Jack Hamilton. It's a formation that doesn't have a right back as such. It's Josh Mullen, who isn't a right back, but he does okay there, to be fair. And it's a formation, for the most importantly, that you've already mentioned, that has Paul McMullen playing as a forward who cannot finish. And funnily enough, his best performance of the season to date was the last game against Partick Thistle, when, after Raith went 2-0 down, McMullen was moved from being up front to go into his normal position out wide. He was excellent and provided 2 assists. But come the next week, he goes back to the forward position, and it feels like he's almost been used for what he can do off the ball based on what Robson wants to achieve, rather than being on the ball. And by that, I mean, Raith want to go, when teams are trying to come out for the back, Raith try and go man for man, and then McMullen is so quick that he forces opponents into a mistake. They kind of play the ball out, so they have to go long. Or you saw against Dunfermline, I mean, I can't remember if it was McMullen that forced a mistake. I don't think it was. But Chillico and Mullen panicked and it was closed down. So that's what they want to do all across the forward line. And McMullen is, by being quick, McMullen is probably the best player available to do that, because Lewis Vaughan can't do it and Jack Hamilton probably can't do it. But I wouldn't play that way. But when you've only lost one league game out of whatever it is, 16, it's quite difficult to quibble about what Barry Robson's doing.
Yeah, well, certainly Dougie Emery thought it should have been a draw. I'd probably agree with him given the lack of quality.
Yeah.
He was pretty critical of his wide players, but he thought Michael Garrity made a positive impression when he came out, and he said he's put himself in the shop window for next week, which is, again, another interesting turn of phrase. But for this one, I suppose as well, the other thing to say is, like, Jackson Longridge got man of the match, and I think people were just disbelief around me. I think there's some people laughing. No one clapped or anything. I've never seen that before. But with this one, what have we learned then from a Morton perspective? Because we mentioned the start to the season, yes, it was 4 draws. You could say 4 games unbeaten, but 4 draws. Now it's 5 games without a win. And it feels like they're in a wee bit of a funk at the moment. I know you reached out to Craig Dunning, Morton fan, who has been incredibly supportive of you and I when we've had to take a greater look at the club, doing the big lower league previews and so on. And he's worked with Craig Fowler on the Patreon when we were taking a deep dive into Morton specifically. What was his thoughts on the current state of the football club?
I mean, basically what I said to him was, is this just the normal kind of Morton start to the season where they don't put too many points together and then by November they're absolute world beaters, or is it something a wee bit more to worry about? And he probably is a wee bit more worried than normal. I think we did talk about it at the start of the season. Okay, Jack Baird and Morgan Boys, they aren't kind of world beaters as centre halves, but they were 2 of the better defenders in a defence that kept loads and loads of clean sheets last season. Few teams kept more, and if you are keeping clean sheets, then that's the basis for, at the very least, not losing games. And to be fair, they haven't lost too many of the season. That was the first. But if you think back to previous Morton sides, and one thing that always stood out about them is that they were horrible to play against. Like, they just scrapped and kind of fought for everything, and they kind of slowed the game down, and they probably
low straps, long throw-ins.
Oh, horrible stuff. But I don't think this team has the ability to do that, and that's what Craig's worried about. They're not easy to play against, and they changed it up against St Johnstone. I mean, they got a really good result at McDermott Park recently, where they became harder to play through them, I suppose. The problem with that is when they kind of park that midfield, and as Dougie Emery said on Saturday, wingers weren't really creating enough. Brophy looked a bit isolated up front. So it feels like, yes, he can become more difficult to beat, but that means that they're probably not going to create any chances. And if they maybe play another forward up front, then they're maybe too easy to play through in the middle of the park. So it feels like we're always here every single season with Morton, and eventually Dougie Emery is able to figure it out somehow. But you do think, well, can he do that every single season? And you worry about it if you're a Morton fan. I'm not sure, because let's face it, Morton could have got the first goal in this game and they could have won on Saturday. And if they had, then Raith and Morton are sitting on the same amount of points. So you don't really want to be too critical of them. But you do wonder if it's going to be a season where, like, normally they're comfortably 6th or 7th, but maybe they won't be quite as comfortable this time around.
Listen, let's just get the first 11 games of the season out of the road. Then you can start winning for 10, and then you can finish mid-table with a real slump at the end. We know exactly what's going to happen. Shaughan, up next, this is a really interesting match. Queen's Park versus Greenock Morton. As I was going up to get my car, I saw Sean Crichton was watching the match. He was getting into his own car. So, penny for his thoughts on this one. How do you see that one going?
This will be... Like, Queen's Park seem to be like reasonably happy with what they've seen so far for the team. I'm not quite so sure. I'm going to go for another draw.
Okay, great. And then a top of the table clash between Raith Rovers and St Johnstone at Starks Park.
I mean, probably. I know St Johnstone fans are kind of suggesting that this is a good time to be playing St Johnstone because Jamie Gullen is probably 50-50 for this game. He's missed the last kind of week or two. The way that Valakari was talking, I think he'll probably miss it. Stevie Marlin is definitely out. I think he's injured till maybe October, November is when he's expected to be back. So maybe it's a good time for Raith to be playing them. I think the problem is that how do Raith, bear in mind Barry Robson is loath to change a team. That was the 4th game in a row where he'd started with the same 11. It feels like he doesn't want to play Gyro. Like he hasn't been seen since an hour into the first game of the season against Queen's Park. And I thought he struggled defensively in the League Cup games as well, albeit scored a couple of goals against League Two opponents. So I don't know if he'll want to play Rowe, which might mean, and if that is what he wants to do, then Jordan Docherty will presumably move to the right, and then Darragh O'Connor will maybe come in and make his debut at centre-half. But whoever goes into the right is going to come up against Josh McPeak, who was one of St Johnstone's most impressive players this season. So maybe it's a decent time to be playing Raith Rovers as well. I mean, at no point have I thought that Raith could challenge for the title this season. But if they could, I mean, if they could beat St Johnstone,
it's a big win. Huge win.
I'm still not going to start believing that Raith could win the league. But it maybe gives the players a wee bit more belief that maybe it could be similar to the season where they challenged Dundee United all the way. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. I can see it being not quite as exciting as I'm hoping it will be, and it might end up all square.
If I was Simo Valakari, the one message I'd pass on to my players, say, see, as soon as you see Josh Ray have the ball in his hands, panic. That would be my advice, because you know what's coming. A great big assist. As well, Shaughan, just finally before we move on from this match, Ricky Chin made his international debut for Malaysia, came on midway through the second half against Palestine. That's pretty cool.
It was really cool. I was working from home yesterday, and I managed to find a stream so I was working away with Malaysia versus Palestine on in the background, but obviously it was like Malaysian commentary. So I was like, well, I can't really watch the game all the time. I actually do have to do some work. But then my ears perked up when I heard Richard Chin, Raith Rovers, getting mentioned.
Amazing.
So he came on about the 80th minute. But the issue was, because it was a friendly, like there was loads of subs getting made. So he had 10 minutes of game time that ultimately became about 4 because the game was so stop-start. He did get the ball a couple of times. He came on wide right, beat a couple of men. But as is his want, as I've seen him now a few times at Raith Rovers, he will beat a man, you get all excited, and then his next touch takes it 5 yards away from him. Very exciting, but a very erratic player. But Malaysians, they seem very, very excited by him. They really got quite a big, seems to be getting quite a big introduction online and stuff. It was cool, really cool.
Oh, that's good, man. That's good. The last time I got excited about a lower league Scottish jobber playing international football was when Fernando Mendy got called up by Guinea-Bissau was it the African Cup of Nations? It would have been, because I remember tweeting, it was a thing from The Simpsons from the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie episode, when Homer's like, if when Poochie's not on screen, all the other characters should be asking, where's Poochie? But instead, when Fernando Mendy's not on the pitch, everyone else should be asking, where's Fernando? And he liked it on Twitter. I remember that.
The funny thing about his debut is that Fernando Mendy scored, and we got all excited, but it turned out that Guinea-Bissau had 2 Fernando Mendys, and it was the other one that scored.
Listen, if you can't get excited, then what can you get excited with? You can't get excited with Fernando Mendy. It doesn't matter which Fernando Mendy. You can't get excited about him scoring in international football. What can you get excited about? Now, we will move on to look at the very best in the KDM Evolution Trophy. And the best of the action from the weekend's matches involved the B teams getting absolutely muddied. Absolutely fantastic news when you look at that big daft 30-team league table at the midway point. Of the 8 teams who cannot progress to the knockout stages, 7 of them are B teams, and on top of that, some of them took absolute pacings at the weekend. Spartans beat Hibs B 5-1, Stennismere beat Kilmarnock B 4-0, Clyde 4, Motherwell B-0, Forfar Athletic 4, Dundee B1, and Alloa Athletic, of course, scoring an injury time winner to beat Celtic B 5-4. So it's good to see that the teams I have the least interest in the whole of Scottish football, and I'm glad to see them getting absolutely pumped.
I just find it really frustrating. I try and remember what Stephen Craigan said. I'm sure he was in charge of Motherwell B when they reached the semi-final of this tournament a few years ago, and he said that brilliant experience for his players, and that they learn so much. So far be it from me to disagree with Stephen Craigan. I suppose the difference is, though, if that Motherwell team got to the semis, then they must have won maybe 4 games to get there, at least, depending on what the format was at that point. Don't know, but let's say 4 games. So I do think that you're more likely to learn and pick up on stuff and take stuff in if you're enjoying what you're doing and you're enjoying the game. And I think I think certainly that weekend was the first of me watching the games, because I knew that we would discuss something from them. But you're looking at a lot of them, and in terms of body language for the B players involved, they kind of look like they just wish it was a full-time whistle. Like they're header in their hands, they're pulling their jerseys over their heads. And listen, maybe they are getting something from it. Maybe they will learn from the experience. I don't know, but it doesn't look like it's getting to the hour mark and they're 5-0 down. I think they just want to be back home. Yeah. Are they learning? No, sure. But I think certainly as a lower league fan, and somebody who has always defended the Challenge Cup and went into bat for it, because I think it's a tournament that over the years has produced good games and great cup finals and whatever. But for it to be used as some kind of, I don't know, finishing school for teenagers, I find it a wee bit disrespectful, to be honest.
I completely agree. That's my issue with it. I sound like I was gleefully enjoying a bunch of 16-year-old kiddies getting leathered. Maybe there's a degree of that. But I think youth development is obviously a very important aspect of Scottish football. Something that's perhaps, I don't want to turn into this podcast into improving Scottish football at all like that. But I know that youth development is obviously very important. I just don't want to see it done on my dime. Use the cooperation of partnerships, use the loan system. There's plenty of ways to develop good young players. Sticking them, what are Hibs B learning like when they get beat by Spartans 5-1? What are they learning from that? I wasn't at the game against Kilmarnock, obviously, but the people, friends and associates who did go, just said it was a total runaround. You got absolutely nothing from that Kilmarnock side. It was just a bit of a walk in the park for Stennismuir. So we're not really learning much from it. Rangers B also, they didn't get bodied, but they've yet to win a fixture out of their 3 games as well. And I suppose last year, again, to go back to Stenny played them last year, and Rangers had Danilo and Yanis Hadji in their team who both scored. So
I think I watched all the highlights that were available, and see in maybe not every game, but let's say I watched 7 games involving B teams. I think at least 6 involved disastrous attempts to play the ball out for the back or really horrendous defensive errors. And I get that. It's young players who are trying to learn their way. But my goodness, it was tough to watch. I mean, it's some really poor stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of poor stuff, let's talk about one of the most bizarre decisions I think anyone's made all season. And this was, well, you, Shaughan, were in Copenhagen having the time of your life. You could have been watching Inverness Caledonian Thistle 2, Stirling Albion 1, who, for whatever reason, they were playing their KDM Evolution Trophy match at the same time as Scotland. I don't know what they were thinking with that.
I couldn't see any explanation.
I was looking for an explanation online.
Couldn't find
it. For those who did go, Ross Cunningham scored a really good goal. Inverness Cali Thistle are top of the Big Daft division at the moment, 9 points out of 9.
A very strange decision. Almost like it was made without checking what time Scotland kicked off on the international weekend.
Yeah, it's great. And then they agreed to do it, and then everyone's trying to get out. Fuck, can I pull a sickie for this one? Is there anything I can do to get out of this? Fuck. But otherwise, like we say, Ross Cunningham's goal was a good goal, but not the goal of the weekend. It might have been any other weekend, but not this one, because, caramba, what about Ewan Loudon's goal for Montrose and their 3-1 win over Aberdeen B? My goodness, this is a stunner. It's Matthias Mikado fires the ball into the box, and Loudon, he stoops and flicks it with his heel over his head and into the corner of the net. Very similar to Olivier Giroud's goal for Arsenal against Crystal Palace on New Year's Day in 2017.
Yes, now that you mention it, I'm aware of that. I compared it to, I harked back to Rene Higuita, the kind of scorpion kick. And I wonder about this, because Saturday was and I'd already seen this. I'd read about it in the morning. So Saturday was the 30th anniversary of Rene Higuita's scorpion kick. And it just feels like a massive coincidence for Loudon to do that, because see, when the ball's coming in, it looks like he makes a decision really early that that's what he wants to do. It doesn't. I don't think it's quite instinctive. I think he realises early, as soon as that ball leaves his Makedo's boot, I think he knows what he wants to do. And I do wonder if he was also aware that it was the 30th anniversary. It's just a really weird coincidence, but an incredible goal.
That'd be really funny if Loudon had watched a clip of that early in the day and thought, you know what, I'm going to pay homage to that big daft goalkeeper and I'm going to try something equally as flamboyant.
It's quite annoying though that obviously Montrose don't have highlights now, but they did put the goal up, so fair enough. But the post-match interview with Stuart Petrie didn't really mention it. He just goes, oh yeah, he doesn't get too many goals like that. And the interview lasts for 6 minutes. Like, there's a big chunk of the interview is about like a preview for the next game. Who cares? Discuss this bloody goal.
I'd be leading with that. I'd be like, tell us all about you and Loudon's goal. That was all right, aye. I mean, you know, the person I do feel sorry for is Aberdeen kiddie who's lying face down on the turf looking for a foul that'll never, ever been given. He's down on his face when you're seeing one of the goal of the season contender. It reminds me of, I've shared this story in the past, I'll share it again. It's my brother's mate who won a ticket in a competition to go to the Champions League final for the 2002 game where it was Real Madrid against Leverkusen. He was in the pie stand where Zidane scored that goal. Like one of the most iconic goals in European football history, and you were getting a pie. Incredible stuff. Now, if that was the goal of the season, Shaughan, can I pick your brains for the miss of the season? Now, you and I have been roundly positive about Robert Jones's impact at East Fife so far, but my goodness, what a boob he made in his size 1-1 draw with Dumbarton. East Fife, they were leading 1-0 with 15 minutes to go. Mikey McKenna's corner, it's headed across the face of goal by Andy Munro. Austin heads that onto the bar. It bounces up very kindly for Jones, who controls the thing in his head. And then shoots wide of the post, but shoots so far wide, it almost goes towards the corner flag.
It's incredible. But you know what makes this better? Is it so one of my pals and his brother that was in Copenhagen, they're both East Fife fans. So I'd got on the topic of Robert Jones. And you're right, we have been reasonably positive. And I was just discussing them in general terms to say, I was kind of surprised that he managed to get a contract with a League One club. Not entirely sure if that's his level. Turns out my pal's brother must be the biggest Robert Jones fan in the world.
Amazing.
He thinks he is absolutely class. See, when I seen that miss, I don't think I've ever texted my pal's brother ever before. As soon as I seen that miss, I was texting him. Really enjoyed Robert Jones's miss at the weekend. But the thing is, I don't even know if it was so that was the worst miss for a goal that would have stood. But Baz' miss, although he was offside, was arguably worse.
I think that Baz miss defied the laws of physics in some way. I actually don't know how it's possible to hit the ball at that trajectory, at that angle, from that distance to the goal line. He must be about 2 or 3 yards out and somehow puts the ball over the bar.
I thought less. I genuinely thought less. I thought maybe it might be less than a yard out, if that. And yeah, it goes flying over the bar. It was like he had invisible shovels on his boots. The way he somehow managed to scoop it over the crossbar for that range.
I suppose the only thing you can say is that at least he was offside for it. Bobby Jones
had no
excuse.
No, you're right. You're right.
And the worst thing was, Scott Honeyman equalised in the 90th minute, so that was a very costly miss from Jones. A very costly miss. But I suppose that's enough about the KDM Evolution Trophy. Just a couple of things to round up from League Two. And there were big changes to the Spartans attack over the weekend. Mark McNulty, the two-time Scotland cap, he has returned to Ainslie Park after spells in Ireland and Australia. But Blair Henderson, their leading scorer since promotion to the SPFL, has left the club. And a statement on the website that accompanied the news, Henderson said, "At this stage of my career, I really need to be playing as much as possible, and that wasn't going to be available to me moving forward, so it was agreed I needed a fresh start." He has moved on to Linlithgow Rose in the Lowland League. And I don't know about you, Shaughan, but the impression I got from the opening day when we covered the match between East Kilbride and the Spartans on the first day where Dougie Samuel effectively went with like a 4-2-4-0, didn't play with an orthodox striker. It felt as though at that point the club were moving in a very different direction to Blair Henderson. Almost felt as though they had outgrown him. And it says a lot that he's made 11 minutes of game time in the league, 2 substitute appearances, 10 minutes against Dumbarton, 1 minute against Forfar Athletic. And it feels as though that some of the criticism I had him, it sounds like it's personal against Henderson. It's really not the case. But I just think outside of scoring goals, which he's very good at doing, you don't get much from him. And I think that Samuel might need more from his forward line, and he's getting that at the moment through Mark Stowe, through Cammy Russell, through Jamie Dishington, and now through Mark McNulty.
Yeah, I do think it's quite bold, but I agree. If Henderson's not scoring goals, then he's not really involved. I totally agree with that. But he generally is scoring goals, or he was scoring goals, and I think he'll go to Linlithgow and score about 1 million in the Lowland League, and we'll see if it pays off. However, I mean, they're sitting second behind East Kilbride, but only on goal difference. They've already beaten East Kilbride this season, so it is working. I do think it's brave, but again, a bit like Raith Rovers, I mean, it's working so far, so makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for Henderson, not for me to say, but I imagine he goes down as a bit of a Spartans legend, given his contribution. You know, he scored the penalty against Albion Rovers that won them promotion into the SPFL, got them the first goals in an SPFL club when they beat Dundee United 1-0 in the League Cup. 27 goals in all competitions in 23-24, 16 goals last season. It's just a bit of a shame for it to end this way, but I don't think anyone will deny the contribution that he's made, and good luck to him going forward. I'm sure he will bring a lot to the Linlithgow Rose forward line. But Mark McNulty comes in, as we mentioned. Now, he had a spell with him, I think, for a couple of months in the 23-24 season when they finished in the playoffs. I think I saw McNulty against Ennismuir. I thought he looked good at points. You could tell his touch and his awareness was at a far higher level than anyone else around him. Just didn't look particularly fit. I think he didn't look particularly fit. He was quite easy to defend against. But if he can regain that fire in his belly, which I think might have left him when he got that big contract at Reading in 2018, I'm going to imagine he's quite a wealthy guy off the back of that. If he wants to be a football player again, if he wants to contribute to the Spartans, they've got a good forward line there. He's got the quality to make it better.
In theory, yes. But I agree. I mean, I remember discussing him when it was at Spartans last time around, and I wasn't as impressed by him as I thought I would be, put it that way. And I do wonder if whatever it was, that whether it was 2 seasons, 3 seasons down south, where he looked pretty good, that got that couple of caps at the time, that's starting to look like a purple patch in an otherwise okay career. So I do hope he contributes positively to Spartans, but I wouldn't say I necessarily expect it. The other thing I would say about Henderson, lastly, is the start that Linlithgow have made to the season. I wouldn't be totally surprised if he's back in the SPFL again this time next year.
Oh, right. All right, with Linlithgow.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to, he couldn't get in the team, so they were going to sell him again. No. That makes sense. Now, our final piece of news to wrap up this podcast, this is perhaps one of the most just absurd things we're ever going to read out in this show. But on Sunday night, Stirling Albion posted this on their website. The club is aware of a post made on X/Twitter last Saturday. The post was an image of a Ku Klux Klan lynch mob with employees of our club edited in it to be hanging from a tree. This is utterly abhorrent behaviour, and we are disgusted that someone who purports to support the club thought it acceptable. I think I could have recorded 1 million Terrace podcasts and never mentioned Stirling Albion and the Ku Klux Klan in the same sentence.
No, I mean, I was completely oblivious to this until I read the statement, and I think my first thought was, people are now going to go and look for this. Like, people that, like me, that didn't know anything about it, might now go and look for it, and maybe it'd already been deleted at that point. Every chance. But then actually, I thought, well, no, we probably should be calling out terrible behaviour. Like there was the situation with was it Sky Stout, the woman that signed for Kilmarnock, and obviously there was terrible behaviour there. That was called out, and the person who done it, as far as I'm aware, was thoroughly thoroughly embarrassed or certainly made to feel ashamed. He obviously thought it was quite funny at the time. So maybe this should be called out. The more I think about it, I think it might be a police matter. I think probably the most pathetic thing is you kind of wonder it. And I think it was similar with Sky Stout as well. Like, it wasn't a young person that said this, and as far as the street talk in terms of Stirling Albion fans, like, that's not a young person that's mucked this picture up. It's an adult that's in their 20s, so you kind of just wonder what goes through their heads. But I think the person is known and has been banned. So good.
That's good. That's good. It's just completely unacceptable. It's one of the things it's probably, you think about these things and that would be funny to do, but then to take the time out to superimpose, to cut out the manager and the assistant manager's face, put them onto people hanging from a tree, and then to post it, the thought process to go through. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
I just don't understand it, and it's good to see the club have taken action, because it's just simply not very funny. And it's unfortunate that we have to end this podcast on a sour note. Maybe we should have ended with Robert Jones's miss, actually. That would have been a fun way to finish it. But nevertheless, Shaughan, is there anything else to be said about the Scottish lower leagues this week?
I don't think so.
Excellent. Well, that'll probably do us for the time being. Shaughan and we will be back next week to talk more about the worst football on the planet, including Edinburgh City versus East Kilbride, by some distance the most compelling fixture in the country this weekend coming in. Shaughan, I am hot and cold all over just thinking about it.
And then you're going, aren't you?
I think I'm going to go to this one. It's Steny are away at Kelty Hearts, and whilst the prospect to go to Kelty is a good one because I like going there, I think this game is it's too compelling a game. It's, for me, it's too compelling a game. I feel as though I feel bad. I just wish it could be like Michael Keaton in the movie Multiplicity and go to both games at the same time.
Apparently McIndoe and Kennedy are very friendly. Did not expect that at all.
I wonder how they know each other. I wonder how they get on. But we'll find out if their relationship is as solid as it was when they're narking at each other for 90 minutes on Saturday afternoon. But if you have liked what you've heard on the show and you want to listen to some more, please do subscribe to our Patreon. If you laid out all the bonus podcasts on that channel back to back, you've enough to carry you to the moon. And you can access them all for just as little, well, not access them all, you can access the lowest tier for as little as £2 per month. It goes up to, I think it's £8, £7. Nevertheless, it's well worth your time, so please be generous. Shaughan, we'll be back next week as we said, so until then, enjoy your football, but unlike that, still an Albion supporter with the Adobe Creative Cloud and an axe to grind, please do so respectfully. Thank you.